Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome into MLS Digest. We are here now ahead of Decision Day, the final regular season match day of MLS before we get into the playoffs. And there are still 13 of the 15 matchups this coming Saturday with real implications as far as standings for these teams. So only two matches where nothing matters at all. So we're not going to cover those two. Those are Atlanta and DC, and then Kansas City against Houston, since both teams in those games are eliminated from the playoffs. But in every other of those 13 games, there are teams that are either in the playoffs or looking to make the playoffs, or even if they're in the playoffs, have a lot of positions where they can end up based on how things play out. And then there's also just in general, of course, really intriguing matchups that are gonna could potentially be playoff matchups if things go certain ways. There's just a million combinations of results that can happen here, and that is the beauty and the goal of decision days. So we're gonna get into all the 13 meaningful matchups on Saturday. I'll get you everything you need to know with lineups, rosters, suspensions, injuries, and everything else you need to know with some predictions included. So before we get into that, please make sure to like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you're new and enjoy the content. We are close to 500 subscribers, and I'd love to hit that as we get into the playoffs for the 2025 MLS season. So we start decision day's slate with an Eastern matchup between Charlotte and Philly. Charlotte in fourth, Philly in first, and they've also clinched the Supporters' Shield, even though the Whitecaps can technically tie Philly on points. If the Whitecaps were to win and Philly loses this match, Philly has the tiebreaker already with total wins with 20, and the Whitecaps have 18. So congrats to Philly. I personally, among many others, counted them out from the beginning of the season due to, of course, firing Jim Curtin. It didn't seem like this roster would kind of just compete, really, especially there were question marks with the midfield, but they completely hit on the signings, a couple of them that came late last year and then a couple in the off season. And Bradley Carnell did much of what he did that first season with St. Louis and has kind of turned his own image around as well. So they are now 3 wins in a row, the Union. Meanwhile, Charlotte also 2 wins in a row bouncing back with a win after 2 losses in a row following that, I think, 9-game win streak. And Charlotte can finish anywhere between 4th and 6th, so that home playoff spot is absolutely still in question because they're tied on points with NIC, and I think they're just winning that tiebreaker on the wins or something like that. So a win here, and they will host that first round series, but that's easier said than done. It's going to be interesting to see how Philly lines up in this one because, everything's clinched. There's been a bit of a break, right, because of the international break recently, so there were only several teams playing makeup games last weekend. So there's been an extended break. So will Philly actually put out a full lineup? I think they will. Because of that context, they want to stay fresh ahead of the playoffs and at least just get minutes logged, whether or not they're going to kind of run themselves into the ground too much or expose too many tactics ahead of the playoffs that we don't know about or whatever. I doubt, but yes, Charlotte, of course, they're going to be missing Pep Biel for the rest of the season. And that's a big loss. He has, double-digit goals and assists this season in his first full season after that half season last year. And he really showed up for this team, and it's a big reason why they're in the position they're in. And it's still a good team. Of course, Zaha and Toklamati's really taken over for Ajamang. But I think this team is very, very limited now without Biel in the playoffs specifically, when it's going to come down to those matchups against, the rest of the top 4, maybe 5. And there's honestly a lot of just dangerous teams in the East. And in a playoffs series, especially depending on who they face, when they're not at home, things can get their games tend to be lower scoring. That's kind of how they've gotten out of the playoffs the past year or two. And the offense just kind of dries up against some better teams. So, yeah, it's hard to call this one. I think Philly's going to give them a good test. And, even though Charlotte is a fortress, I haven't really seen them outside of that Miami game really convince me that, they can compete against very good teams in the East. They do the business at home against the Minnows, but outside of that, I don't know. So I think Philly can hold on for a draw in this one because their defense is also very, very solid. I'm going to call this one a 1-1 draw. Next up, it's Cincinnati hosting Montreal. Cincinnati sitting in second right now, and they can only finish either there or in third. They're tied on points with Miami right now, but have the tiebreaker advantage with one more win at the moment. So all they have to do on decision day is at least equal whatever Inter Miami's result is. Or, if Miami just loses to Nashville, then they will remain second. And yeah, it seems very likely for them comparing those two teams as matchups, because since he hosts Montreal here, Montreal has been, one of the first teams eliminated in the whole league, not playing for anything for some time now. But they've gotten some, kind of random results recently, just out of the blue. Losing to St. Louis at home, losing to Red Bulls at home, not really great results because neither of those teams are going to be in the playoffs either. But then they randomly beat Charlotte on the road, one of those rare Charlotte home losses, and then tied Nashville at home. So they can play a bit of a spoiler. Owusu can, of course, be a danger at any time. And also the fact that Denkey is suspended for this on yellow cards. So, there's been some guys kind of filling in for Cincy. And Denkey is it's kind of gonna be a big blow ahead of the playoffs for Cincy, because you want to stay fresh. That's the whole goal here. And the playoffs as well are just extended in general because of these best of 3 series to start. And if we remember last year correctly, but after that first round series in the second round, there was like a 2 to 3 week break, and that just kind of had all different types of effects. So you just want to stay fresh, and that suspension is, of course, not good for this game, but also just going forward as far as keeping that chemistry freshness up for Cincinnati. But at home here, even with some other injuries, of course, to that defensive midfield back line, I think against Montreal, Cincinnati will have enough to get by and lock down that second spot. We'll see also if Roman Celentano in goal will come back. He's been out dealing with, I believe it's some sort of leg issue, and he was trending towards that last game against the Red Bulls, didn't play, and he's a top goalkeeper in MLS, so they're going to want him back, and hopefully he can get some time here before locking down back into that starting goalkeeping role for the playoffs. Moving on to the Crew hosting the Red Bulls, and the Crew are right exactly where the Red Bulls wish they were, and they're on the outside looking in because they've been eliminated with no chance. And the Crew, even though they're in the final playoff spot, are not at risk of dropping out of the playoffs, and they can only get up to 7th, which would take them out of the play-in and into the first round, and avoid a matchup with the Union in the first round if they were to, play in the wild card game and then win it. And, that would either mean Cincy or Miami if they got to 7th. So it's kind of pick your poison there. But regardless, yeah, this is not the Crew team of the past. There's many similar faces, but there's been a couple of injuries. And, of course, the big question was whether the goal scoring would be answered and filled with Cucho gone. And that just hasn't been the case. There's been the chances. We've seen the same kind of phases of play, the intelligence of the way this team progresses the ball and picks teams apart in a sense. But the quality just hasn't been there once again. And Rossi was injured for about a month. He finally got back last game, so that's huge for their chances in any match. But then, of course, Abu Ali after he really started to find some form, had a season-ending injury, and that's just the crucial loss. So it's hard to really expect this team to make a deep playoff run, especially because of the situation where they find themselves in, where they're going to face one of these big boys in the early rounds immediately. And the only thing going for them outside of, that is just their playoff pedigree and, Nancy making just really good adjustments on a match-to-match basis and out-coaching teams, right? But it's hard to expect them to just flip that switch with the personnel they have as far as being clinical, correcting those things, and all of that. So here they face the Red Bulls. Red Bulls, really disappointing season. It's just about where I had them. I had them basically scraping the play-in, but they, obviously won't be in the playoffs with players like Forsberg and Choupo-Moting. That's simply unacceptable. But once again, outside of, they really haven't been a organization that's spent all that much. And even though Choupo-Moting returned the investment as far as his production, there's still just so much more the Red Bulls could have done as far as making signings. And Lewis Morgan's been out the whole year. So it's their streak has finally ended, the Red Bulls, as far as that streak of making the playoffs. But, a year removed from last year's MLS Cup final, we're going to have neither of those finalists in the playoffs. So that's exactly how quickly life can humble you in MLS, and how unpredictable it is. So here, I think, the Crew should, be favorites, but they haven't won in their last 4, and they've kind of come up against, all types of opposition. So they are just really inconsistent. They haven't been able to score, and that's been at the crux of their issues. And at the same time, they always seem to slip in a goal, allow a goal against them in late stages. So it's hard to predict, but I just think the Red Bulls are just done for the season, and the Crew will, try to squeak their way up a couple of standings. But I think that with the teams above them, they need that help. I don't think they're going to get that help. So I think they're going to stay in 9th, regardless of what they do here against the Red Bulls. Next up, we got a really entertaining match here between Nashville and Miami. 6th versus 3rd in the East, and Nashville can end in a variety of places. They need a decent amount of things to go their way to get into that 4th and final spot of the hosting the first round, best of 3 series, and they can drop all the way to 8th if the 2 teams below them pick up points and they lose this match, or even draw it. And as for Miami, they're locked into either 2nd or 3rd. They would need to basically better Cincy's result. And if Cincy wins, it doesn't matter what they do here. So they need Cincy to draw or lose and to basically win this match to jump into 2nd. And honestly, I think it's a 50-50 split. Miami's been, kind of running the table in the sense of making up some points with all the games they had in hand. But they played some, average teams, pretty bad teams here and there. And, they lost to the Fire at home. So that kind of put a nail in the coffin on the making up the points to challenge for the Supporter Shield on the final day. But still, they're going to at least have a home playoff series advantage. And I just think this is a real 50-50 matchup. It should be entertaining. We're going to get the best of these 2 teams because there's still so much on the line, especially for Nashville. And it should be an intense match. And honestly, I think Nashville will avoid losing. I think at home they've just been really, really on the front foot, in your face, and it's just a really enjoyable brand to watch. So really hard to make a prediction here, but this is already a preview of a potential playoff series, honestly, because if this were to end in a draw, and one of the 2 teams below Nashville gets a win, then they drop to 7th, or vice versa. Like at the moment, this would be a playoff matchup. So 3 versus 6. So it's really, really intriguing. There's a couple of these clashes on decision day that could literally be their also next game for these teams, right? Against the same opponent in the playoffs. And it's just really, really fun. So yeah, I think ultimately Nashville will at least get a draw in this one, but there should be goals galore. Moving on to the Revs, who are eliminated, hosting the Fire, who are in 8th, sitting on 52 points. And, it's been a terrible season for the Revs. Caleb Porter got fired. They've been absolutely awful as well at home. Meanwhile, the Fire have set their franchise or organization record for the most wins in a single season on the road after they won an absolute banger game. I think it was 5-3 against Miami a couple of weeks ago during one of those makeup weekends. And yeah, they can finish as high as 6th, finish as low as 9th. And I'm a Fire fan, if you don't know, if you're new to the channel, but I'm gonna believe, because this is a very realistic possibility where they can jump up to 6th, because they're only 1 point behind Orlando, 2 points behind Nashville, and this is just a very favorable weekend as far as the matchups for them to gain that ground and potentially, avoid having to play the Union in the first round if they were to stay in the wild card, win it, and then onward. And they can there's a real possibility where they face Miami in the first round, because if they jump to 6, it would be 3 versus 6. They're playing the Revs here. Once again, the Revs terrible at home. The Fire, one of the best teams on the road. They're full strength here, essentially. Just a blistering attack. I just don't see how they don't win this game, or at least hold up their end of the bargain in terms of scoring. I think the Revs are just checked out. Carles Hill's future, I think, is really in question, and I just don't see a motivation standpoint from the Revs. Nothing to really take into next season, in my opinion. That's all that positive. And it's just more of the same bad situation for them. So I think the Fire will win this game, and then you have, Orlando on the road to Toronto, which literally just drew like 8 games in a row before they just finally lost to LAFC or whoever it was. And it's just Toronto's just not an easy out. They make games very, very tight and defending. So all the Fire need is a win here, an Orlando draw or loss at Toronto, which isn't all out of the question, and then Nashville to draw or lose to Miami as well, or maybe just a loss. And that's also entirely possible. I think that game's completely unpredictable, and no outcome is really a sure thing, or the vice versa. So it's just going to be, there's so many situations that could play out on decision day. But as far as this match goes, I think the Fire, especially on the odds for my betting folks, are really kind of being undervalued. And for the splits, the road home splits for both these teams, and just all the context, I just don't see how the Fire don't, with the form they're in as well, beating Miami. I think it's a no-brainer. I think that they should handle their end of the bargain and see what if the teams above them can slip up. Moving on, it's Toronto hosting Orlando. Now, Toronto's been eliminated for some time now, or maybe not mathematically, but spiritually out of the question for a while. But they've just been an unbelievably resilient team since adding Mihailovic, and obviously moving on from the Italians and just reconstructing this roster a little bit. Brynhildsen also left after a very, just this one season, right? I don't remember if he's been loaned out or left already, but regardless, he's gone. And yeah, they've just been fighting, right? All these draws, they're scrappy. They come back in these games. It's a bunch of 1-1s, and especially at home here in the home finale. I don't know. I just think this Orlando team's been very shaky recently. They had really good spells early in the season, but the attack, it seems like, has dried up just a little bit. And they just really had a terrible choke against Vancouver, where they went up. Vancouver tied in the second half, and then there was a very controversial goal line situation where the ball seemed to cross the net. They didn't call it, and then Mueller still won it in the literal last phase of the extra time, added time, for the Whitecaps, and that made there be so many more possibilities now for Orlando to finish in terms of the standings because of that loss on decision day. So a lot of things can happen here. Orlando's going to get a decent amount of players back from the international break that they had missing last week, right? And that was a part of that game, but they also still they definitely had the more favorable roster compared to the Whitecaps in that game. But yeah, this is interesting. Orlando needs to do the business because they're at risk of, if they even draw here, one of the there's two teams behind them that if they win can, I believe, surpass them. I don't know about the Crew situation. I think they would be tied on wins, but the Crew's goal difference is pretty bad. So it's really only the Fire, right? So they need a win here to avoid that wild card. They're not going to have an easy matchup anyways in the first round, being one of the lower seeds. But I'm sure they would like to avoid that extra game, get a little bit of extra rest, because the wild card round is the Wednesday following this decision day, and then the first round starts the 3 days later on the Saturday, Sunday, whatever. So you want a full week of rest and avoid that extra travel potentially, etc. But I think it's going to be a scrappy game. Toronto has been playing spoiler to so many teams recently, and that's what I'm going to call here. I think Toronto holds Orlando at least to a draw. Moving on to the only match on decision day that is a cross-conference game. Because there are 30 teams in MLS, that means 15 matches, and you cannot have, of course, 15 teams in each conference. You have to have this situation, right? So it's NYC and Seattle, both fifth in their respective conferences, but there's not much wiggle room for either, and in Seattle's case, there's none. So this game is essentially meaningless to them, outside of just maybe getting some players minutes, figuring out how they want to, what their starting roster is essentially going to be for the first playoff match. I don't know, however they want to approach it. But for NYC, there's a real possibility, that they can jump into fourth because they're tied with Charlotte, who's in fourth right now. And, the only difference is that wins or whatever. So Charlotte plays the Union. That's a very good situation for NYC because that's a very losable game for Charlotte, or in the case of a draw, all NYC needs to do, as long as they win their match and Charlotte doesn't win, then they would jump into fourth, and no one wants to come to NYC's baseball fields, whichever one they're going to be playing at. They always flip-flop. This match is going to be at Citi Field. But regardless, no one wants to come there. It's just not an ideal situation, and they've been pretty damn good there. As they always are. So really not too much from me as far as what to expect from Seattle. NYC, Martinez has been bagging goals. Mercado has been a good addition, of course, and it's just been a bit of a surprising team. They just, once again, are good at using their home field advantage. They've just been a little bit more consistent than some other teams below them, and that's just how tight it is right now in the East from 4 through even 8, 9. Essentially, it's like 4 or 5 points. So it's hard to really put too many teams on a pedestal. It's just been a very competitive Eastern Conference from between all seeds compared to the West, I would say. We head on over to the western portion of Decision Day. All these games, of course, as well, will be all starting at the same time for this respective conference. And we start with the the Rapids hosting LAFC. It seems like these teams play like 5 times a year. I think that's because they started the season with the Champions Cup 2-legger. But regardless, there's 4 teams still vying for the final 2 play-in spots, right, in the West. And the Rapids have really let it slip recently. They were as high as, I think, like 6th or 7th, a month or 2 back. And since they sold, of course, Mihailovic and got Paxton Aronson, the young player, it just really hasn't been going well. That transition as of right now. In his 6 games, they have just 1 win, 1 draw, and 4 losses. And Aronson has yet to record a goal contribution of any sort. So, losing to also teams kind of in and around the chase because they just lost to RSL on the road last time out. Lost to Dallas a couple of games back. And then also losing to the Galaxy, even though that was on the road, like it's just been a real bad time to just not be competitive, right? And here I don't even want to talk about the scenarios of what they need to go right as well, because look at what is ahead of them after hearing all that context. It's LAFC, and they've been absolutely running the damn table. Just having 6 wins in a row before last time out, 4 days ago, because of the international break. They had no Son, no Bouanga. Austin, of course, had a couple of their own players out, but Austin on the road is never easy. And, of course, Austin won that 1-0. Just something they absolutely love to do all season long. So not too surprising there. But LAFC, once again, can finish in second and at least are guaranteed some sort of home playoff spot. And they doesn't matter what it's been, home or away, they've literally just been scoring in bunches. Obviously, Son and especially Bouanga got a lot of run in the recent international window because Bouanga was getting Gabon. They're not qualified, but he was part of the huge reason in the whole qualifying as to why, right, that Gabon is even in the Intercontinental Playoff and having a chance at the World Cup. So he's been getting a lot of run time, but it doesn't really matter for Bouanga. He plays every match. He never wants to rest. And they know what's the opportunity is here. So it's a real shot at second. They're sitting pretty anyways. And they're just going to be a force to be reckoned with regardless of what the matchup is. I think they should comfortably win their first round matchup no matter what, but we'll see how the bracket plays out. But yeah, I think the Rapids just have been on a sharp decline. LAFC, I think, is going to take it to them, and the Rapids are just going to be more desperate, in my opinion, in this game, and that's going to just expose them to the style that LAFC loves to play. So I think LAFC wins this one comfortably. Moving on, it's the Galaxy hosting Minnesota. The Galaxy, of course, awful season, not much to talk about, just continuing to harp on the same things. But for Minnesota, they're in 4th. Now, luckily for them, the Seattle is not within range to jump into 4th. So they will at least host, the first round playoff series in some sense. But they're sitting in 4th. They can go up to as high as 2nd, but I just don't think they're going to get the help even if they win here. And they should win here. And I say should because they've really also been one of those teams that has, just been super inconsistent the final stretch of the season. But that's also due to, of course, 2 of their biggest players. One of them, Oluwaseyi, going to Villarreal. And then, of course, Yeboah, who is injured, has been injured. He should be returning for the playoffs. They're just going to be cautious, but, I don't think they're going to run him here. And they did turn around with a win against Kansas City in their last game, but before that, a draw to the Rapids, a loss to the Fire at home. They got upset by Austin in that Open Cup semifinal. And so, I still think they should do the job here because the tactics will allow them to really expose this Galaxy team. And this Galaxy team, of course, it's hard to predict what kind of lineup they're going to run out with because they've been playing a lot of young players recently. Players like Royce, Paintsill, etc. Like, they're not going to risk that, right? They're getting ready for next year, and they're going to want to put on a show, of course, like play their brand here at home, final home game of the season after such a disappointing season, right? Being the reigning MLS Cup champs, I get it, but yeah, I think Minnesota will get the job done, get the win, but it probably won't be all that pretty because they just don't have that firepower up top. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can be vertical or not and be successful vertically with their counterattacks without those types of actual strikers on the field. So we'll see if Longwana gets into some advanced positions or something like that. But regardless, they can win ugly too, of course, with their throw-ins, corners, everything. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Galaxy kind of mess up in those types of situations and give up one of those key goals that Minnesota has been using to be where they are right now. So I think Minnesota wins this one on decision day. Moving on, it's the Timbers hosting San Diego. The Timbers are 7th right now, and they can slip up and fall into the play-in, but that's really all it is as far as their possible endings. And they only have really Dallas on their tails. They would have to lose this game. Dallas would have to win that game. And Dallas, I believe, plays against Vancouver, which we'll get to on the road. So even if Portland were to lose this game, I'd say it's very unlikely that Dallas wins on the road at the Whitecaps. So I would say they're assured 7th for the most part. But anything can happen, and I'd say even a point here is questionable against a red hot San Diego team in 2nd right now. Of course, one of the surprises of the season, of course, as the expansion team, but also just an elite team on the road, able to handle any environment, kill teams off late, and win in a dramatic fashion. And San Diego just as well. They let that grasp on first slip in the West. It seems like the Whitecaps are going to get it because, of course, the Whitecaps are 3 points up right now. They would have to lose to Dallas once again, which is unlikely at home. And then San Diego would have to win this. It's just so they can also finish as low as 4th. So they're going to have some sort of home playoff game. And there's going to be some players returning for San Diego from the international break as well, like Godoy, McNair. So that's good for them. And the Timbers in general, since making those acquisitions, just haven't been the same team as far as the attacking productions. And their numbers in general just weren't good from the start of the season. They were overperforming heavily early, and they've regressed in a little bit in that sense. But I still think this defense is pretty elite. It's just about, I don't know, they've just been a little bit more balanced, but that's also just led to maybe even worse results for them. And it's going to be very hard for them in the playoffs playing against one of these top 4 teams. So I think San Diego will win this one. They have the star power. Even though the Timbers' home form has been pretty good, I think San Diego will light fireworks up on the final day here. Moving on, it's San Jose hosting Austin. And wow, San Jose was a real good feel-good story to start the season in a sense, right? They got some good acquisitions. Bruce Arena taking over, who's obviously been there, done that with a bunch of teams. But wow, the recent form has just been abysmal. And they've really been one of those teams that's fallen off a cliff in the past couple of months after kind of hanging around the play-in spots for most of the season. It's now 4 losses in their last 5, 5 losses in their last 7, and 7 losses in their last 9. So, and just 2 wins in that entire were the other results. So they're on the outside looking in for the playoffs. Dallas sitting on 41, RSL on 40, and San Jose does not even have, the amount of wins really to win tiebreakers for the most part. So they need RSL and Dallas to drop points. Now, in Dallas's case, I would say it's likely that they lose to Vancouver, right, on the road. RSL, we're going to have to see. They will go to St. Louis, which can be, I don't know. I mean, St. Louis is bad, but you never know how that one can play out. I'd say that's about, sort of an even game. The good thing for San Jose in this situation is the only real reason I think they have a case to somehow miraculously pull off making the play-in spot is that they are, one, fully healthy, but two, are playing against an Austin team that has somehow, some way effectively used their style and secured a pretty solid playoff spot, and they can no longer, they have no wiggle room. They have nowhere else to go. They're locked into the 6th seed, and so really Austin has nothing to play for here. Of course, they're going to play for pride. They're going to be a hard team to break down, but it's traveling for them to San Jose, right? They don't want to do too much before the playoffs. Uzuni as well played a lot of minutes for Albania in the recent international break, and he's, of course, been their star in the second half of the season. So I see a scenario where San Jose at least gets the win here to, ask questions of the teams above them, right? And give themselves just a chance doing their job. And so I think San Jose can do it. Pull out a performance. Espinoza, show me something. Someone just be a little competent defensively, and maybe they can do this. I kind of do want to believe, because they have been a fun team at moments, but it just seems like the pressure's gotten to them recently, and who knows, maybe they can, end Austin's kind of streak for a little bit before we get into the playoffs. So we'll see what happens. One of the final games on the Western slate of Decision Day is St. Louis hosting RSL. Now, RSL is sitting now in 9th, but there's, scenarios where they can finish in a bunch of places, right, in the play-in or outside the playoffs entirely. Of course, they're sitting on 40 points. Colorado below them on 40 points, and they have 1 win extra on Colorado. So, and then of course 2 points above San Jose. So they realistically just need a draw here. And Colorado, of course, plays LAFC, which I think Colorado is kind of done and dusted. I think it'd be a real shock if they won that game. Maybe draw, maybe. So in that case, they would still hold that spot over Colorado for the final spot, and then San Jose needs to win. But San Jose is 2 wins under RSL. So if they both ended on 41, they would also win that tiebreaker. So really, in my opinion, I think they just need a draw to hold on to this final spot. Now, if they win, and of course also they probably have the most favorable matchup of the 4 teams vying for these 2 spots, right? Because like I said, San Jose, Austin, right? Even though San Jose is at home, Colorado at home, yes, but LAFC, and then Dallas traveling to Vancouver, right? And Dallas is 1 point above RSL. So you're playing St. Louis, who has been, once again, terrible this season. Has had a couple of bright moments. I'm forgetting his name, but the youth player for them, McSorley, he's coming into his own, right? He had that good performance at San Jose, and he can be an option for them finally going forward next season. But Diego Luna, I think, can carry this team, and I think he's gonna show up in this match. He just came back. Of course, he was with the U.S. men's national team again in their couple of friendlies. And so I just think the roster makeup, this team is good enough to at least draw here, and I think that'll be enough. So I think they win, but once again, I think they have the most kind of wiggle room out compared to anyone else, right, given the context of who they're playing and all the situations around them. So I think they should be fine and lock in one of these play-in spots. I think if anyone slips up, it's going to be Dallas, which we're about to get to. We close out Decision Day with a 1 versus 8 matchup in the West. The Whitecaps, even though they cannot contend for Supporters Shield, are very much, almost 99% certainly going to get the first seed in the West since they're 3 points above San Diego. And here they host Dallas. And Dallas completely screwed up. Complete safety as far as making the playoffs when last time out this past weekend against the Galaxy, they lost 2-1. Logan Farrington picking up the red card in the first half, a straight red card, which completely screwed their chances. And then also, to add to that, Peter Musa, of course, the star striker, picked up a yellow card, and he's going to be suspended on yellow card accumulation for this match. So as if getting any type of result in Vancouver isn't hard enough, right, with how this team is right now. You lose those 2 players, right, who have been super good bright spots, and you have, 2 teams outside the play-ins, right, breathing down your throat, right, if they get wins. And there's just so much room for this to go wrong, to mess up, to let this slip. And I think it's already slipped in my opinion. I think that loss to Galaxy was it. Like, I don't know how they can recover from this, especially with the lineup they're going to field. They're going to really, I think, just try and park the bus and hope that works, I guess. But I think it's over for them. Vancouver, of course, on the flip side, really rounding into form, right? Also, the great thing is that Gald has finally come back, and he's been getting some goal contributions. So it's really coming well for Vancouver going into the playoffs. They're going to get this first seed, in my opinion. They should easily avoid losing. I think they're going to win. I want to say easily win, but who knows? It could be a shock 0-0 if Dallas really does some dark arts, because I just don't see any other way that they can, if they play a different style, that where they pick up points in this match. So I think Vancouver wins regardless, and we'll see if San Jose can get the win in their home finale and kind of gain that ground and take Dallas out of the play-in match.